Today, I'm talking to Bongani Sabisa. Do I have the pronunciation right there, Bongani?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so you are an coding and robotics specialist, according to your LinkedIn profile. Is that correct? You are really interested and involved in coding and robotics.
Yes. Before that, I was at St. Stephen's College, where
Mhm.
that's where I worked with the grade sixes and sevens.
Okay, okay. But now, when you're working with the young ones, because that's very interesting to me, the fact that you are working with young kids in coding and robotics, what is your exposure to them or your exposure as a teacher to AI? How do you, please talk to us about what do you see in terms of artificial intelligence happening in schools, specifically with the young kids? Are they using it? How are they adopting to the coding and the robotics and so forth? Please share some of your thoughts.
I would say in the junior prep, we haven't exposed them much into AI. We recently started when we were creating uh, th- that cartoon trend. I'm not sure if you've seen a lot of teachers on LinkedIn. They were creating those those
Mm, mm,
cartoons.
mm, mm,
Yes, I'd
mm,
say that's the only thing so far that I have exposed them to AI. However, it isn't a part of our curriculum as yet.
mm,
But
mm,
however,
mm.
that I know that in the senior prep and also in the high school they do expose children to AI. So the challenge that we're having with the young ones, it's prompting AI, giving it those specific instruction on what it should do or what you're looking for. So if
Mm.
you can think about it, children from about 7 to 9, most of them they're still struggling with the spelling. So yeah, I think it would be just a huge mess should we fully expose them to that, unless you have written all the prompts for them on the board and they can see them clearly. But then you still find those children who are struggling to type faster than the others. You see.
Okay, so you are basically referring to something like, for instance, ChatGPT or Gemini, Grok, Claude from Anthropic. I'm not sure if you've ventured into the space of the Chinese models, like, for instance, DeepSeek. But what I'm getting at is a lot of the conversations that I have about AI is that the kids are already using it. So I know it's
Mm.
not part of the curriculum. And, a lot of teachers tend to want to go away from AI because the kids are just simply doing the homework. They're typing in
Yes.
the questions and there's the homework done. It seems like they're not learning anything from this whole process. And normally it is your senior phase and FET phase kids that are clued up in how to use
Yes.
AI for the shortcuts. That's why I'm asking the question. So you're saying you are not exposing them to AI, but have you not actually picked up at all that they are using AI? Or are they still too innocent at that age group, to really go out there and use AI for their maths homework and their essays and stuff like that?
Yeah, I really don't think in the junior phase, like a lot of students use AI that much, simply because you'll find most of the parents, even at home, they don't expose children fully to electrical devices. They've got things like you can't watch TV on these days. You can't use your iPads. You see those kind of things. But however, going back to my previous job, um, at St. Stephen's, I did expose students to AI there. Um, so what I would always encourage them, it's say use it, but at the end of the day, it is in your accountability to use it wisely, because what ChatGPT or Gemini does, it has a specific language or certain words that I will be able to pick up
Hmm.
that will determine that you've used it and you didn't apply your own knowledge. And it's so funny how homework will be handed in so quickly, and then when you say take me through it.
mm, mm, mm,
And then that's where you catch and say it is not your work because simply you imprompted it, you copied and pasted, you're like, homework done, I'm ready to hand it in. But however, you've got no idea on what that AI tool written for you. So, I mean, some of them wouldn't even read
mm,
what's written there. I remember there was an incident whereby you see right at the bottom, it's gonna say to you, I'm happy to do this for you in a slide, or I'm happy to do
mm.
this for you, and then right at the top, it's gonna be like, sure, here's your what written.
And
So
that was copied.
yes, I had one student who copied the whole thing, but accidentally forgot to delete that top
Mm.
part.
That's normally what we see in the jokes online, students forgetting that. So you actually had it physically happen with a real
No, yeah,
student with you.
exactly. And then I told them, I
Mm,
said, the problem that you guys forget that teachers know you in and out.
mm,
There's a certain of level that I know that you are at this level. There is no way you can write like this.
mm, mm,
You know.
mm, mm, mm.
So those are the things that they're not picking up.
But okay, so let's take the conversation towards where this podcast is really positioned in the market. Because I've like I said, I've had a lot of discussions. We actually have a few podcasts already that will go live in due course, and there seems to be a couple of different viewpoints when we say AI in education. It's such a broad
Mm,
statement, really, and I want to focus what I believe this podcast should be, but just quickly discussing the various sides of it. There's a lot of people who think when you say AI in education, it only applies to teachers. Teachers should use AI, for instance, for lesson planning. Because I mean, it's
yeah.
brilliant at something like that. I mean, if you look at, for instance, coding, Claude, for one, is excellent at coding. Um, I was listening to a podcast, I think 2 or 3 days ago, of a guy who said he heard that Spotify, the company Spotify, they said that
Yes.
their own coders, the people who actually work for them as computer programmers, haven't written a single line of code themselves since December last year. Not a single line. So all they do is they tell the AI this and this and this and this is what I want, and then they just go through it and double check, obviously. Because one thing that has really stood out in all the conversations is that AI cannot be autonomous all by itself. It
Mm,
needs a human with knowledge. My partner in a different podcast actually summarized it very well. He said, you can get a PhD level concept explained to you as if you are a 10-year-old. You can ask ChatGPT or Grok or any of those. You can say, explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. And suddenly you understand what is actually a PhD level concept explained to you as if you are a 10-year-old. However, you can't take that 10-year-old explanation and suddenly assume that you are a PhD level expert. You still need the subject expert. And I think that was a very key insight in a lot of these conversations is that you still need a very clued up human. And that comes back to what you said when the kids just basically submit the response from ChatGPT as if it is their own. They didn't go through it and double checked
yeah.
and made it their own. They just, okay, there you are. So that idea of having a human expert comes back to the concept of teachers using AI. Because your subject and a maths teacher and a language teacher and geography teacher, they are still subject experts. If they use AI, for their lesson plans or for their Bloom's taxonomy or for their assessments, give me a couple of questions that I can ask, so forth, they still oversee what is happening there, which is not a bad thing. When the kids use it in the same way to do research for their homework, is it a bad thing or a good thing? if students, let's just stop there for a second. I want to hear your opinion. If the students, the learners, if they use AI for research, like everybody used Google search for the last 20 odd years, is that a good or a bad
Yeah.
thing if the kids use it but still remain the person in charge? What do you think?
Mm. Well, I personally don't think it's a bad thing to do it. Um, I think it is a good thing to do it. However, if you're looking for things such as um, ideas or how it can guide you in answering,
Mm,
um, the one platform that I specifically like is um, DeepSeek, which I use it now and then as well for
okay.
for, for my assignments. It will give you a brief of where you went right and where you went wrong, and how and and where to correct
Mm,
your mistakes. That I specifically like, because it's not actually writing everything for you to say, okay, here it is, it's ready to be submitted.
mm,
So I think what we need to focus on is how the students are using it. If they're using it in a correct way, then that does not make it wrong. you
no.
know if they
Mm,
use it as a guideline, they use it to gather some ideas, and then actually they can even say, okay, maybe give me a rough draft or just an overview, and then
mm,
take it from there. Because I believe we all just can't start writing something from the top of our heads. We need some ideas there and there. We need some guideline on how to tackle that specific topic, or how to start it and how to end it.
mm, mm,
So I think them using it correctly, I would just always support it. However, it's always responsible that you also um, show your work in it,
mm, mm, mm,
so that when I read it, I can say, uh, Bongani, I can tell that Bongani wrote this. Yeah, so that I mustn't feel that you are submitting somebody else's work.
mm, mm, mm,
Because to me, then that's not you learning. Because chances are, if I can say, let's rewrite what we just submitted in class without any devices,
mm.
now that might be a challenge for you, because you've got no clue,
Yes,
you've got
yes,
no
yes.
idea. See,
Mm,
and then that's when, if I then had to compare two scripts, then that's where the catch will be. And I can see that most definitely you used an AI platform and you didn't
mm,
apply your knowledge in it. And therefore, your knowledge is what I'm looking for to see your level, or where you at with that
mm.
specific topic.
So, okay, what I was going to ask is you mentioned a very key word there, and that is learning. So, when you can still learn, when you are using resources such as Google search or an encyclopedia, in the old days we had to use book, encyclopedia book to do research. It's still
Yeah.
somebody else's content that you are using for your submission. When we Google searched, we were taught to always cite the sources. With
Yes.
AI, it's difficult to know what the source is unless you prompt it beforehand to say, if you get something from the web, or if you get something from that was published, please tell me the sources so that I can put the sources at the end of whatever I do. However, if we look at something like, for instance, you mentioned it earlier as well, spelling. If a child takes AI, just normal, any of the large language models, and say, I need to improve my spelling, please give me words by speaking it to me, because AI can also speak to you,
Yeah.
or I will give you the word as I pronounce it, and you need to tell me what the spelling is. And if we look at something like mathematics, for instance, you can say to it, I need to improve my tables. Please give me every day, give me 10 questions, different multiplication tables. I will do them one by one. You mark them and tell me if I'm right or wrong. that AI suddenly becomes a tutor on a daily basis, to get certain skills in. But when you take, for instance, a more difficult concept, and we can look at mathematics, which is my subject, or we can look at more of the learning subjects, like, for instance, geography or history, languages with vocabulary and all the senses. Um, how would you, and this is my question in this podcast, basically, which I'm trying to address, how would we take AI and make it a responsible educator or a responsible tutor? Because when you look at the normal large language model, it is essentially a people pleaser. It's
Mm.
designed to just give you the answer. So it may be very proud of itself if it produces an essay, but it still comes from that mindset of, I gave you the answer. You gave me the topic of the essay, I gave you the answer. If you ask me a mathematics question, I will take the question and I'll give you the answer that long. And the child can literally just write it down without learning anything. What are your thoughts on that? How can we make that transition from the power of a large language model to become a tutor or an educator?
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's a very tricky one. But I mean, um, I always believe that if it could be changed to a certain point whereby um, it will ask you back, what is your overview?
Yes, yes,
You
yes.
know.
Hmm.
So I yeah I think if we can then change just only that part, um, to say, oh, feed me with what you have written already,
Hmm.
or what you are thinking already, and then let me try and rechannel your thoughts.
Okay, so do you think that is possible? I mean, we can't really go and tap into the data frames, or what are they called, data centers of, for instance, OpenAI, and say we want to change the code. It's not something we can do,
Yeah.
you and I. So, is it possible? What are your thoughts? Is it possible to have that change made to AI? I have an answer for you, but I just want to first
Mm.
hear what you say. And one of the questions that I wanted to send you beforehand, and unfortunately I didn't, is, it reads as follows: if you could design AI for education from scratch, what is one principle it must absolutely respect in your ideal world? And I think you've just touched on that. It must ask you back. It must stop and ask you questions to understand if you understand what it tried to explain to you, like a good
Yeah.
educator would do. But do you think it is possible?
Absolutely. I think to with the speed we're moving with, I think we might have missed that part already. I don't think going back to restructuring that, to that extent level will be beneficial now, because I think now also to think about it is that people are also afraid of change. People don't like
Mm-hmm.
change. So should we get to that certain part, I don't think most people now will start relying back on AI, because we are used to the fact that it feeds us. Now having to think about it that I have to feed it back, it might be a total struggle. So yeah, I think we've we're already privileged enough to that privilege of it just feeding us.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think now to go back and say, however, sorry, this is how it's going to work now. It might, a lot of people I think might pull back from actually accessing it as a resource.
Okay, so here's something that came out in some of the previous podcasts is, number one, the idea of pedagogy. AI as it stands, your normal large language models don't follow pedagogy. So they are trained to help you with coding, they are trained to help you with analysis, they are trained to answer your questions as good as possible. but they don't follow an educator's philosophy. It's not
Mm.
trained. And do you think because, as you just said, I mean, your words were we already past that point, but do you think the big companies will eventually buy into that idea of getting their models, let's say DeepSeek, let's say Grok, Claude, will they actually make a stop and say, you know what, education is actually not just about providing answers, but it's about providing training in the mind. You need to stop, you need to check whether your students actually follow what you're saying. Giving a whole 3-page response to a question isn't learning, it's providing an answer. And the pedagogy requires that, as you rightly said, you stop and ask, are you with me? I mean, that's what every teacher does, isn't it? You teach something and
Yes.
you say, are you with me? Do you understand? Any questions before you carry on? And the experience, the general experience out there, myself included, is that your large language models don't do that. They are just not there where they stop and actually ask you, are you with me? Do you understand what I've just done? Do you have a question before we proceed? Um, so the only way we can fix that is really to hope that the companies will, the large language models will eventually buy into that idea. But will they? What do you think? Will they make that mind shift?
I th- I th- I think there's still a chance with yeah with the amount of lazy students that we're having in this day and age, because I don't think we are heading towards a more um, academic people,
Mm,
in the future, because literally in this day and age you don't have to think, you don't have to be stressing yourself, you don't have to be opening books, you don't have to be trying and sift the internet just to find that specific answer you're looking for. You've got this platform that can literally do anything you can imagine, you know. So I think once a lot of students are joining the market and they seeing that we are actually employing, or the generation that's coming up, it's not getting any better, because without this platform, what else are we getting from them? Which I really think it would be a good idea for them to restructure it a bit, so that we can make the next generation to be even more better. Because I see it as well in school now. If you'd ask a child something, they quick to go to your devices,
mm, mm.
and send shut it up. And if you were to put two students, or maybe three or four, in a room, and then put devices and put a couple of test books, and then just give them a topic, and then sit back and watch which one is heading to that test book and which one is heading to the device, you know so I think that's the generation that we are building. And in future we might struggle, because we actually don't have enough knowledge, but we are relying on these certain types of platforms to give us the knowledge,
Mm.
you know and I always think that AI, at any point, whether you use it for your assignments, essay, or whatever, but I don't think at any point it will replace a teacher, because both uh, these things, I think they do different jobs.
Okay, but here's a question for you then, because I was thinking of it just now. If you look at yourself as a teacher and your colleagues at your school, um, if let's take it 20, 30 years from now, when there are new students coming into the educational system as teachers, but they never learned. I mean, you just basically said these AI models don't require of us to learn; they just give us the answers. How will you teach? Think of yourself. How will you teach if you don't have the knowledge? Because you never learned. Wouldn't
Mm.
an AI robot then be a better teacher than a human teacher?
I think it would be for those specific people who don't have knowledge. But however, for those that do have the knowledge, then I don't think it would. And then going back to my point saying the generation that's coming up slowly, slowly, I think that's where we are heading to. We've got people who are not skilled enough for that specific job
Hmm.
because um, the one thing again, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, that the UCT eventually stopped the AI detecting
I wasn't
in
aware of
their.
that. No.
So you see, the
Hmm.
University of Cape Town totally shut down all the AI detects for their students. They say if you come into the University of Cape Town, you are allowed to use AI. However, use it responsibly.
Hmm.
But now here's a catch: if in the whole university you're teaching about 80, 90 students as a lecturer, you you have no relationship with these students, first of all, and then how do you know that I wrote this? Because chances are we've never even met, we've never even spoken. I would be one of that student that sit right at the back of your lecturers,
Hmm. Just
you
under
know.
the radar.
And exactly,
Hmm.
you see. But however, I think that has also um, disadvantage and advantage because what the AI detectors will then do, they will literally detect even words that you have written yourself. But now it gets to a point whereby it's also confused whether
Hmm.
is this my writing or this is your writing. And I think it threw a lot of students under the bus to a point whereby they started questioning these detectors if are they really working,
Hmm.
because there's no way that I can write something and then you think AI generated it,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. So the policeman
you know
really failed there. The digital policeman still wasn't good enough to distinguish between digital content creation and human content creation. So they've decided to
yes.
stop it. I mean, there are a lot of stories as well about companies, big companies, who laid off a lot of employees because they thought an AI bot or an AI agent can suddenly do customer service better. So they let go of the humans and they got these AI companies or the agents to do the customer interaction. Now, I don't know if you've had any of that. I have with some companies already in South Africa where you can clearly see that you're not speaking to a human on the other side of that chatbot. There's definitely an AI there, and it's stupid. It basically breaks down the trust relationship with the business when they think
Yeah.
you, as the client, is so dumb that you don't really understand they are trying to save money by throwing you under the bus as the client because you can't get your answers, your questions answered. I mean, I've had a case recently where I literally said to that chatbot, "Are you stupid? I've just told you. I've just told you what you asked me 2 minutes ago." And it says, "Please provide me with your name." And I thought, you know, it's totally, in human terms, we would say you're not reading the room,
Yes.
because it's arrogant, it's antagonizing the way these AIs deal with their clients. And I think a lot of companies have discovered that AI cannot replace the human. But coming back to the question of AI as the source of knowledge and the kids in school basically just passing that information through as if it is their own, not learning. I want to stick with that word, learning, because that might be a time bomb. That might come and bite us 20, 30 years from now if we have a whole population of kids who are now in school who are then part of the workforce, but they've got no knowledge. They never learned. They can only pass on. They're good at prompting and they can pass that on, but can they actually contribute, to the bigger economy and a bigger world? So my feeling is that there's a danger in not learning because an AI, as good as it is, is still just a source. It's not
Yeah.
an originator. And a good example I read one day was the Mona Lisa. You know, you can take the AI models and you can say, take the Mona Lisa and make it a man. Or take the Mona Lisa and let it sit at the beach under an umbrella, you know. And the AI can take the Mona Lisa and do all of that for you. But the AI cannot generate the Mona Lisa. We needed Leonardo da Vinci for that. You know, we needed
Yeah.
somebody that's got creativity and you know a deep understanding of what art is to create the Mona Lisa. And the same goes for teaching. I mean, you as a teacher have got empathy. You know, you've got understanding. You look at your kids and you can see if one of your students is a bit down, and you can have a human touch in dealing with that student. Will AI ever have that?
I doubt it, eh? Yeah, no, no, no.
Mm,
I really doubt it because if you can think about it, how many, I mean, there's thousands of people who are on who are on ChatGPT, who are on Gemini, and then chances are it we don't have that specific relationship
mm.
with it, because there's just a bunch of us that's using it, and also for um, d- uh, different purposes, you know.
So
So
if carry on, please, Bongani.
so and then with the teacher, it's nice because you are then sectioned to these students for like 12 months. So I think by then you would have developed that relationship with them, created that bond with them, and then I think you seeing them, also teaching online, it doesn't make it different,
Mm, mm.
because you then interact with the same people throughout, however, compared to an AI whereby there's just millions of us who are on the platform day in and day out. So I really don't think we would hit that point whereby we do have that specific relationship with it.
Okay, so we do have this problem area that's slowly surfacing where the school kids currently will be the workforce of tomorrow. But if we don't teach them to learn, they won't be proper workforce members in the future because they've got nothing really to contribute since they have never learned to learn. But we also have the power of that AI in terms of getting the knowledge through that you need. I mean, so as a teacher, and I want to bounce this off you, I want to hear what you say about this statement. If, as a teacher, you can use AI to better yourself, but you can't use AI to replace yourself. What do you think of that?
uh yeah, no, that's a good one. um I think with me making a better version of myself, it's just trying to ask the platform to actually saying, okay, I had this couple of ideas for years, which I have repeated it over and over, and then just using it just to search and say, would you provide me with um, any ideas that are out there, at the moment, or just ask it what's trending, or what are other teachers doing, or what's new in the market, or how can I change this into more fun, into more interesting, or how can I adapt more, like new latest skills. Because
Mm,
if you can think about it, the teachers that we had when I started school to me being a teacher now, I can see a total different shift, over
mm,
the years. um I would say back then it was a thing of books, one way. There was no time for fun and learning. We had teachers who were strict. You would literally fear that that person. The thought of you just not going to school, you would think that the next day you'd then be asked, "Where were you? Why didn't you come?" You know, and then most of the times the fear of just asking just to step out of the classroom, to go to the bathroom. Most students were scared back then, you know. And then to the teachers that we have now in this generation, mostly who are young, who are fun, who have lots of energy, um, who who really make the classroom more fun and students actually looking forward to it.
Mm.
An example with me, I know like every child now loves devices. So at my school currently, I'm one of those favorite uh, teachers because I just simply allow students to be on the devices and playing games. But then I was thinking about it and say, should they shift me to going back into a classroom now and be like, okay, now from now on, you are also uh, going by the book. It's either you're teaching mathematics. Will I still be that favorite teacher now because I don't have what interests them, which
Mm.
are the devices and which are allowing them to actually playing games, building Lego.
Mm.
So yeah. So I think just to better ourselves, it's a very good thing to do. I don't see anything wrong with that because honestly, the market is changing every now and then.
Okay, but here's the problem that I've seen surfacing, and that this podcast is really trying to address is you as a teacher can better yourself with AI. Can the students, the learners, can they better themselves in learning by using the same tool as you use to better yourself? Is there a learning component in AI for the student that still needs to learn? Because I mean, that's why they're at school. If you think about it, they're not at school to work, they're at school to learn because they need some skill. Some people will go into engineering, some people will go into medical field, some people will go into your, say, for instance, your geography, weather forecasters, or something. Uh, some people will become entrepreneurs, but everybody needs to learn how to read, how to write, how to count, basic numeracy skills. If you can't do numeracy skills, for instance, you can't do your taxes, you have got to get somebody that can do your taxes. Those people are now in trouble because AI can do their tax evaluations better than most of those accountants can. It's like there's a whole shift coming in the world of certain skills that can be done by AI and certain skills that cannot be done by AI. And I'm focusing on, in this podcast series, I'm focusing on teachers specifically. I don't think AI can replace a great teacher. It can enhance teachers, it can make teachers better at what they do in terms of, for instance, just taking something as normal as a lesson plan. It can do your whole term's worth of lesson plans for you with the press of a button and a few prompts, but it doesn't replace you as a teacher in the classroom. Now, you basically just mentioned that if you were now to be taken out of the coding and robotics classroom and put into geography or put into history or to put into mathematics, where the device is no longer part of what you're trying to teach. Now there's a different cognitive level of understanding required for the learning process. Is AI now suddenly redundant, or can it still play a role there in other subjects where it isn't really about technology, first of all, but knowledge?
I think it can still play a role. Yes, I think it can play a role, and also the students can also um, enhance themselves. using AI. I think the challenge that we're having, it's just them not being um, knowledgeable enough how to use AI, or us as teachers, we then not trying to channel them into how to use AI, or what are the right guidelines of using AI, but enhancing themselves 100%, they can do that.
Okay, but
Um,
yes, sorry, here's another question then. People, generally speaking, are always lazy. People take the path of least resistance. So when you, as a teacher, sit with DeepSeek and you are asking it to help you design an assessment, for argument's sake, in coding or whatever. I mean, you can ask it to help you. It is hard work. It's not the path of least resistance. It's not the easy way out where you actually sit with the AI and you develop something that you can then present to your students. Would a typical school child that you are exposed to every single day of your life, would that school child really go and make something that can be easy harder for the purpose of learning? Would they? Is that a natural thing from kids, school kids, that they have the knowledge and the insight and the maturity to understand? And that specifically comes back to the level, where you are with the prep school. Are those kids really mature enough to understand that the easy way out is actually not beneficial?
no.
And how do we teach them that thing? How do we force that onto them to understand that this is a tool that can enhance you, but you have to use it properly, otherwise it's just going to replace you.
I actually don't think we can bridge that gap at the moment. Yeah, I doubt it, because chances are I would say in a class of about 25, how many students will actually take that advice,
Mm.
and how many students will be like, no, you're really wasting our time. And for me, this is the way out, and then they go through the easy way. So
Mm.
I really don't think we can at any point bridge that gap, whereby, because I think now, a- a- as I said earlier on, that the generation that we are building now, it's more, they lack knowledge. They're looking for easy way outs.
Mm.
Everything is quickly done for them. um we're not teaching them that struggle as well, that, and say, you need to be fully focused, more determined for something that you want. And I think it's all these tools that we have now that are making these children to be so entitled to think, why literally would I go the harder route if there's an easy way out?
But how does this impact your assessments? Because I mean, it's one thing if I'm sitting in your class this morning and you are teaching me, and let's say, for instance, a coding loop, and I go home this afternoon and I ask ChatGPT or Claude, I need a code for Python that will give me this specific loop, and I just take it and I publish it and it works. And then 3 weeks from now, I sit in your classroom with a piece of paper and a pen in my hand and a test paper that you gave me, and now suddenly I can't answer any of those questions because there was no learning for me. I just basically passed the assignment of the homework straight onto AI, got it back. Yes, it's working. I can publish it online. It's working, but I can't answer any questions in my teacher's test. And my question to you is, if you're saying we can't really do anything about it right now because the kids are taking the easy way out, how is that going to impact the results of tests and assessments? Are we going to have to lower the pass rate even more? Or how are we going to solve this? Because obviously there's going to be a lot of kids that cannot do their own assessments because they are so dependent on AI answering the questions on their behalf that they've never learned. And we keep coming back to this word of learning because it's part of human. Being human is part of learning. Even the AI had to learn by being trained, on billions and billions of web pages. So you can't really do anything if you haven't learned how to do it. And where's this heading? Is it a crash? Are we heading for a cliff?
I mean, I would say that we're heading towards that. But however, one thing that I like about Danefen is we are not a project homeschool thing.
Hmm.
We are that school whereby we would prompt you in advance that there's a certain test that's coming up. But the nice thing about it is that everything is then done in school. So you are not allowed to do any of the assignments
Hmm.
um, at home. I think that also gives us that platform to be like, to be able to grade you correctly, and to also know that this test was done in class. I was supervising it, and these are the strengths and these are the weakness of these students. Because I think taking stuff home, it also gets tricky to a point whereby you've got no idea the involvement of parents
Hmm.
in
Oh,
that.
well, that's
And
been
then
a
now
problem forever,
time,
hasn't it?
it is, and then when it's time to mark, now you've got no idea whether are you still marking the child or are you marking the parent.
At your school, are you more involved with homeschoolers than full-time students, like a public school, for instance? Just want to make sure I understand your setup there correctly. That do you actually have students that are not sitting in your class every single day? They basically just enrolled with you.
No, no, no. We strictly don't have that. We've got students who come to school on a daily basis.
Hmm.
So what we do is we would then inform students that there's a certain assignment, there's a group work coming up. But the nice thing is we never send things to be done at home. I
Okay.
would
Yes.
say,
Yes.
I would say it's only homework, but also we're not that big homework school. You know, we believe in a setup whereby students should learn at school and they should rest at home.
Mm.
And then also we don't trying to impact the parents' lives whereby now they need to knock off early to go find this project things for you. They must run around. So we're trying to cut all of those things, you know, um, and also just to minimize that parent involvement in your schoolwork, so that when it comes to a time whereby it's report writing, I know what I wrote, about you. Because chances are, if most of your projects are done at home and you're getting such good grades for them, that will contradict the work that you do in class,
Mm, mm,
you
mm,
know. And then come grading time, I've got no idea which level to put you in. And then if I specifically focus on a level that you perform in class, then the parents are going to complain to be like, how come this student got 80 for the project that was done at home?
mm, mm.
You see, so I
S-
think if most schools can try and shift to that direction, to be like, let's do a lot of uh, assessing work in class. You can send those extra things home. I mean, like things like homework. It's not much, but if it has to do with any assessment, I think it will be it's best that you do it in class while you're supervising student. Um, you can also encourage them to go home. They can use AI, but the chances the nice thing about it, that's when you'll start to see the students who went home to study and the students who went home just to memorize and cram just for this test. And chances are, how much are you going to remember? And then
mm,
if you think about it, if you're writing that test only at the end of the day, and you went through your AI last night, are you going to remember all the stuff throughout the day in school?
Actually want to touch on that whole idea, because I'm sure theoretical assessments, your normal test writing as we know it, in all schools, apart from maybe some of the homeschool environments where the teachers are supervising, all public schools and private schools will have students coming in and writing their test under supervision. I don't think a test will be written at home. So just to draw that distinction in what you just said is that when you are referring to assessments being done in school, or schools really should get more on that bandwagon of assessments being done at school, I'm sure you are referring to practical assessments, not theoretical tests that they actually have to write to relay their knowledge of the subject matter. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, 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 you are. But if you were to think about it, let's take a subject like business studies.
Hmm.
If if you are given a an assessment to say go and develop a business plan,
Mm-hmm.
chances of chances are you can't do that in class with me supervising you. Am I right?
Well, it's
You
going to
then
be
now have to,
difficult.
yes, you see.
Hmm.
So now that's when we are trying to say, trying to gauge as well the parent involvement. I
Hmm.
think it's nice to go home, gather your resources, and then maybe in our subject, then that's when we then all sit and say, okay, now let us put our business plan together now,
Hmm. Hmm.
start with your your objectives, go into your SWOT analysis, and then and the rest of it,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's those type of assessments that I'm referring to, that they need more of research, and they are more depth, that I think what we do as DaneFan, we then advise students to go out there and actually find resources at home. They most welcome to ask the parents to assist there and there. But it's so nice that when they come to class, it all gets composed here in class.
Hmm. Okay, but let's say, for instance, I mean, your subject. Do you teach anything other than coding and robotics? Is there other subjects on your plate?
I teach IT.
IT. Okay, so and you said it's pretty much the grade 7 to 9 year olds that you are teaching. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So take me through a typical period. Let's say on Monday you've got a class sitting there for you. How long is such a period? 30 minutes,
So
45
a period is an hour.
hour, okay, 60 minutes.
Yes, is it?
I want you to take me and the viewers of this video through a typical period of an hour, 60 minutes. How many students are there in such a class? Typically, I mean,
We
is
are
it 20, 30,
we're sitting at about 25.
25? Okay, so 25 students come into your class on Monday morning. It's a period of 60 minutes ahead of them. What would you typically teach for a grade 7 and 9 student in IT? Just take us through that curriculum, the ATP. What exactly is in on the table for that 60 minutes? Or let's say there's 50 minutes left after they've settled in and so forth. What exactly are your curriculum? I think that's the best way I can really phrase it, is what do you teach in such a period? Forgetting about assessments now and sitting down for tests and so forth, these kids are sitting there to learn IT from you, who is an IT teacher. What is the knowledge transfer that happens in that 60 minutes?
So in that 60 minutes, depending on which grade is coming, from the IT perspective, we're looking at things like, firstly, uh, le- uh, learning what a device is,
Mhm, mhm,
and then we would learn at things like how can we take care of our devices, because they're young,
mhm,
others, the devices, so we look at all those rules first, and then as the weeks go, we look into how do we log in, we
Mm,
practice our username, we practice our passwords, we then move into um, we move into the importance of not sharing your password.
mm. So it's more ethics
Um,
really than coding, is it? Am I correct? Ethics
yes,
and practice, good practice with devices.
yes, good practice,
Okay.
and then once they've settled in, now they know how to log in. We look at, different platforms because we are a Google school.
Mm,
So we look at all the Google platforms that we use, things like your Google Drive,
mm,
your Google Class. We look at the Google Slides, the Google Form,
mm,
uh, the Google Docs, and then I would then take them every week on each platform to say um, Google Docs performs these tasks,
mm,
and then following week we look at um, Google Slides
mm,
for instance, and then we'll be like, uh, Google Slides does these specific tasks, and then just to take through them through all of that. However, the coding and robotics, it is um, integrated into the lesson.
mm,
You
mm,
know, there's days whereby we wouldn't do anything related to IT. We just learning coding and robotics. But however, we still need our devices to pair our robots. So that's
mm,
where
mm.
again that IT and that coding robotics uh, gets combined, whereby now you need to log in again to this device to pair your robot to move.
So let's make it a little bit practical. So let's say today's lesson is about the Google form. All right. Um, you've got 60 minutes. You've got about 25 students in front of you. If you have to take every single one of those students by hand, literally watch over their shoulder that they understand the differences of the Google form, you pretty much have 2 minutes per student. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that limits you as a teacher for personal attention. So you can stand in front of the class and you can teach the basics of a Google form, and you can say the different question types and different responses. Is this a form or a quiz? How do you get feedback? And you put up a spreadsheet, etc., etc. You can teach all of that either from a slideshow or from just physically doing it on the computer and displaying it on the screen with the projector, or just theoretical, just telling them about it and so forth and so forth. And we can do the same conversation on password protection. How
Yeah.
do you, as a student, learn not to use your name as your password? Because somebody will easily guess that. How do you get random 16 character passwords generated? And what do you do to keep those passwords safe? Because if you just write it down, you're going to lose that piece of paper. So if you put it somewhere that it can easily be hacked, it's not secure. These are the type of things that I'm referring to. This is one thing to hear my teacher talk about Google Forms and talk about password security and integrity, but I, as a student, need my teacher to actually help me set up a Google Form. I want to do a Google form to ask my family tonight, what do we have for dinner? I want to try this. When I get home, I want to send to my sisters and my siblings and my parents a questionnaire so that we can know what we are going to have for dinner tonight. Just as a practical exercise in setting up a Google form. But the practical reality is that my teacher only has 2 minutes for me to actually stand next to me and help me, on the keyboard or whatever. Can we solve that with AI? Where we can say it's a practical limitation that a teacher only has 1 to 2 minutes per student in a classroom. Yet the learning needs to take place with that student actually applying that. That's where homework typically comes in. Is you learn something in school in the morning and you go home and you do your homework and you apply what you learned this morning to see if you can actually answer the questions. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, you do a formal assessment to see if you can retain that knowledge. But just that learning process from classroom to home, can we solve that problem of a teacher not physically being available for their students, for an hour, but only 2 minutes, to that teacher actually being available via AI in the afternoons when they need them? Is that a possibility? Is there something in the AI world, coming back to the theme of this podcast, AI in education, is there something that can be done to duplicate you this afternoon to all your students as long as they need you?
I think that can be done, however, in the more senior and high school. But however, with the junior ones, I don't think that's possible because to think about it, if the junior ones are more used to their teacher now, and then the junior ones will only take what the teacher says because they think that is right. But it's so hard to teach a junior uh, if you're not used to them because or maybe they're used to that specific teacher. And anything that you write on the board, they take it as it is correct because it's coming from that trusted teacher that I always see on a daily basis.
Mm.
So I think shifting that to into them saying do it via AI might be quite difficult. And then the interesting thing that I do with them in my class, we all move at the same pace. So what I do if I'm teaching something like Google Form, I will project my screen and they sitting with their laptops as well. And then I would say we're taking it step by step. Try by all means not to go ahead of me because now that will cause challenges. So whatever I've projected on the board, I always tell them that you need to be at the certain step where I am. So you need to try and move with me. And then I would go like extra mile and be like, now click this, now
Mm.
look at this, does your screen look like mine, you know now we move on to this. And by the end of the lesson, chances are you'll see that their screens are exactly the same as my screen because I've taken them through it step
Mm.
by step. But it's not a thing of like high school. I would say, okay, morning students, today we're doing a Google form. Let's go. Here are the questions, go with it. But with the younger ones, it's nice because you take them through the journey. However, you might have those hiccups now and then. The students can't see what you said they must click, or they've accidentally clicked on something. And recently, I got them the mices, because they struggle with the touchpad.
Mm.
Their fingers are still small. They haven't got used to the uh, right click
Mm.
and drag at the moment. So I don't think in the foundation phase setup that would work, but however, more in a senior and high school, um, I think it would generally work.
But let's bring a bit of a learning component back into this conversation. In the Google form, you've got different types of responses. So there's the long
Yeah.
answer, which is a paragraph, and then I think it's called the short answer, which
Short answer,
is
yes.
limited to a certain number of characters. Now, you will, when you are at that point where you are actually creating a question in a Google form, you'll show them how they can look at the multi-choice questions, the radio buttons, and then there's a paragraph and a short answer or short form answer option. And you will tell them you use the paragraph answer for this and you use the short answer for that. And you've done your part because you've transferred that knowledge to them. They now know, or they are supposed to know, which type of answer to use for which type of question in the Google form. However, when they come home this afternoon and they want to play on their laptops and create Google Forms, they may have forgotten what you said this morning about the difference between the types of questions that can be asked. And this is where I'm heading at. That theoretical component, the retaining of knowledge. You transferred knowledge this morning. You are hoping that all 25 of them understand and will remember what is the difference between the types of questions. my question to you really is, and again, this is not about taking away anything from the existing process. It's about taking you as a teacher and duplicating you for the students in the afternoon. Surely that student can go onto ChatGPT this afternoon and say, what is the difference between the different types of Google questions? And then ChatGPT will tell them, okay, you've got the short answer for this, and the paragraph answer for that, and multi-choice with radio buttons, and multi-choice with checkboxes, all of those different options. You typically use it for this and this and this and this and this. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
But, here's my but, would a student do that? Would they actually take the time to go and prompt an AI large language model on the types of different questions that can be used for a Google form? Would they? I mean,
I
is it part of their nature to actually take the path of highest resistance, to do more work, to go and learn something that they remember you addressed it this morning. They remember you addressed it this morning. Now they're sitting there, they can't remember what Mr. Sabisa said. Let me go and ask AI to just refresh my memory. Would they do that?
I really think that goes with the type of student, because I think we've got those curious ones, we've got those invested ones, we've got those ones who'd be like, I learned it at school, I'll sit at school tomorrow. Um, so I think, yeah, it goes with what the child really wants to learn, whether did they really find the lesson more interesting, and it's something that from their own interest they would love to know. I've had students quite last year who would come and say, "What what was that platform again that we did?" I went home to see if I can do it. But I mean, in a class of 25, I would have about two or three.
Hmm.
So that's when I that these are the students who really enjoyed the lesson, who are very curious, and who would really want to know more about this platform that we learned. And
Okay,
then we've
so
got those students, as soon as they walk into the door, the school bags are thrown that way, the socks are that way, and they're heading for that PlayStation.
hmm.
And whatever you taught, it went out of the room and will see it tomorrow.
That is the group of students that I'm concerned about myself. Is are we letting 20 out of 25 students fall through the cracks because they do not have natural curiosity? They are not naturally inclined to leave the PlayStation for a couple of minutes and actually apply what they learned this morning. Are those students not thrown under the bus in terms of adults one day? Because they are just not learning anything apart from playing games. Now, I mean, I'm not knocking games. There's a certain skill in being good at a PlayStation game that me as an old school person just don't get. I mean, I don't get this idea of PlayStation, but I understand that Minecraft and Roblox and all these other games that you do on PlayStation. I don't even know the names of these things, but there is a definite level of skill that can be utilized in the workforce if a student has got the dedication to sit for 3 hours and play a game, a strategic game. There's something to be said for that student, concentrating for 3 hours, even though it's a game. You might be able to use that focus in a different context, definitely. I'm just concerned about 20 out of 25 students not having a natural curiosity to go and do what you would like them to do this afternoon. And we just, okay, so you're part of that group, let's move on. Typically, that all 25 students would have to do homework. You can't say to just the five curious ones, you do the homework because we know you like this, and the other 25, you don't have to do the homework, or the other 20, you don't have to do the homework because I know that you're not interested. Typically, everybody has to do the homework because all 25 of them will sit down for a test somewhere in the next couple of weeks. And they need to
Yeah.
give their feedback of what they've learned in a formal test. So I'm working towards the idea of, like I said before, duplicating you for the students this afternoon. And I think I'm going to use a word now that I don't think, because I've listened very carefully to hear if you use the word at all, that I believe can solve this. So I want to explain something to you that maybe you don't know, maybe you do. So if you do, stop me. All right. Are you familiar with the idea of AI agents? Do you know what that is? When we talk about an AI agent, what is the difference between that and a large language model? Or just your normal free ChatGPT interface?
Yeah, I know the general ones, not the not the AI agent.
Okay, so let me explain it to you. My partner explained it to me because that is a very good analogy to remember. You've got your student here, and you've got your large language model here. And typically, these two would, you go on and you type your questions or whatever, ask ChatGPT or Claude or any of these for work with your homework. What an agent does is it comes in the middle and it is trained. So whereas this large language model has got training to just provide the answers. That's what it does. It just provides answers. It's a people pleaser. Whereas the agent comes in and takes the question first. It's trained to do something with that question or that response or whatever, and it gets that from the large language model. So the agent sits in the middle. It basically comes in as the teacher because this agent can be trained. And you mentioned it earlier, having the AI needs to ask questions. Are you with me? Do you understand what we've just done? Do you have other questions? Can we move on? That's what an agent does. It intercepts that free knowledge that the platforms would just give to the students by filtering according to the students' understanding of it first. So if you want to give homework, such as the different types of Google Forms or questions in a Google form, you can train an AI agent to actually have 5 or 6 questions on every one of those question types first, which the student needs to answer before moving on to something else. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's actually trained to refrain from moving on until it is satisfied with the student's level of understanding. And that training needs to be done by people like yourself, teachers, people who know what's going on. Your OpenAI software engineers and your Google Gemini software engineers and the people at Anthropic, they know what they're doing, but they don't know what you do. They are not teachers. They don't know pedagogy as you do. They don't have the curriculum that you need to follow. So, as a teacher, you can train this agent to actually be there in the afternoons to duplicate you. What do you think of that? Because that's
I
existing
really,
technology. It does. It exists.
no, no, I think that's very good, a good idea to look at it. Um, yes, no, I like that approach, and I think it could be very useful. But however, going back to the age group, um, we've got parents who are still not so relaxed with their students being on the devices just by themselves. Um, in my class, I had a situation whereby I had one child that went to Google search and search what up. So so you see, so I think now we're trying to avoid that thing. And then also, I mean, AI is good, but I think it it, it would be so nice to be also instructed to a point whereby it shouldn't provide certain information.
Well, you see, that's what I mean
Because
with the training. Because when you look at an agent, you can train that agent for the age level. You can train that agent in ethics. You can train that agent in following specific sequences of the curriculum. You could train an agent to not respond to questions such as just give me the answer. You can train it to
Yeah.
say, sorry, I won't. Whereas if you do that for the large language model or the Google search, it will do what you ask it. Whereas an agent becomes an agent. It stops certain things from happening because it was trained to stop those things from happening. It's not just a free for all. So when you look at the parents who are hesitant about the devices, one understands that screen time is a very dangerous thing, and the parents who are responsible for their kids, in terms of screen time, very very well done to them. A lot of parents just don't seem to care. So the parents who are involved, that's brilliant. However, coming back to the idea of learning, and this is the question I keep coming back to in these podcasts, is can the AI agent be an educator like Mr. Sabisa? Can that agent that was trained by my teacher actually help me this afternoon to learn what I am supposed to learn? And then once that answer is affirmative, we can then say, okay, but can we now get the parents to be involved in consenting to my child actually using that agent, but not necessarily everything else that is available on the World Wide Web? So is that a route, coming back to the original question of AI in education, is that the route that we can expect the world to move towards, that AI agents that are trained in pedagogy, in ethics, in learning outcomes by a real teacher, can that agent actually duplicate the learning experience that you cannot do in 60 minutes in a period in the morning in a class?
Mm. No, I think they can. I like the fact that I have to prompt those instructions. So
Yes.
I would say it is then there in my to represent me.
Yes.
Yes. So I think it can. It would be actually a very good a very good idea. And then I think that student will also relate that agent to me and say, actually, this is what my teacher would say or would do in
Yes.
class. So yeah, so it's not just feeding me, as my teacher also back in school does not just give me answers.
Okay, so can we conclude this conversation then on that point that you, as a teacher who sit in or stand in front of a class every day of your life, that is your work, that is your passion, that is your job, that you believe that an agentic approach to AI is actually beneficial? Can we answer that question? I'm putting words in your mouth, so I need for you to say yes or no or modify it. But is that the answer to this podcast theme of AI in education should move towards an agentic approach?
I think so. Actually, I really think so.
Okay. So, Bongani, thank you very much. I think we have pretty much run the course of our time frame for this podcast. I'm glad we got to that answer. Is there any closing comments from your side that you would like to give potential viewers? Remembering people who are watching this video on YouTube will be parents, hopefully kids, learners, other teachers and educators, other role players in the educational sector, people who've got nothing to do with education, but just find these videos interesting. What would you tell them as a teacher about AI in education before we conclude?
I think just my conclusion would be to continue encouraging students to use AI, but it would be best if they use it um, accordingly and responsibly, and also to know the fact that teachers will always pick up if this is your work or this is AI generated work. Reasons being AI's got those specific words that it always generates. And therefore, as teachers, we already know the language that AI use or the specific vocabulary that it goes for. So it will be most definitely be easy for us to pick it up, because chances are, if I know my student and I know that they are not capable of writing certain words, and how can you then give me that work that has those specific words, you know? So yeah, so I think they can use it very responsibly, to generate some ideas, to give them some guidelines, you know, ju- uh, just to help them brainstorm. Um, and then they can take it from there. They can take the idea that they have received from AI, and try and run with that through their own knowledge. So I always think that being original is also important.
Okay, perfect. I thank you for that. Thank you for your time this morning, Bongani, for taking the time off to speak to us. And I hope you have a great weekend further. I know you've got another meeting in a few minutes, so good luck with that. But thank you very much for your time this morning sitting in with me.
Thank you so much. No problem. It's a great pleasure.
Okay, thank you.